We are 6 weeks into our series, our journey of experiencing God. So if you're new or new-ish, we've been going week by week through this study called Experiencing God. And the big idea is this, is that God is always at work in ways that often we miss. And we're learning how to see it by focusing less on what we want and what we need, but saying, God, what are you doing? God, in this, to solve this problem in my life, God, what problems in the world do you want me to be a part of? Or God, this problem that I want you to take away, God, maybe you want to do something in it. And I've been hearing amazing stories of people hearing from God. I wish I could share them all with you. I wish I could tell you the long story of sitting with a woman in the most difficult season of her life. And her telling me, I feel like every single day, if not once, but twice a day, God has shown up and reminded me that I'm not alone in it. Or this other woman right between services, she came up to me, she's like, I've been praying for 6 weeks and it's been crickets from God. I've heard nothing. But yesterday, he said once, twice, 3 times, said the exact same thing. And the first, like maybe second, and the third's like, okay, I think that is God, but I'm still not totally sure. I saw it yesterday. I had the opportunity to officiate a celebration of life. And the one thing that this woman wanted at her celebration of life, she's like, I want the world to know about the joy I have in Jesus, which is crazy because she was a mother of 2 adults and she died way too early after a 3-year battle with cancer. But she said, I want the world to know, everyone who's there, I want them to know about what God has done in my life. And so I started like, well, how did she get to that place? I assumed it was her battle with cancer that brought her there and brought her to this church. And I found out that, again, 40 years earlier, she had a friend invite her to go ice skating. She then became a professional competitive ice skater, and her life went one direction. Her friend's life went this way. But when she got cancer, she circled back to this friend who invited her ice skating and changed her life, who also was going through or just had a victory over cancer. And she said, hey, I need a church to go to. And she's like, I got this great one. You can come and be a part of it. 3 years later, as her celebration of life, she's telling about the hope and joy she has in Jesus. You see, I don't know what your story is, but I hope at some point you have this moment where you say, I believe that not only God is real, but he loves me enough to speak and be involved. And it's gonna look and feel different. And some of you are like, I don't know if I even believe in God. And I hope today that for the first time you hear from him, and I don't gotta convince you because you by yourself with your own brain, your own experience it. Some of us, again, this idea of God speaking, we're so mysterious, and it's complicated. And in that, it brings me to this talk. Because if you're doing the Experiencing God thing, you've got the table of contents. You look, there's a different topic every week except this week. And this week, there's 2 weeks back to back on hearing God's voice. Why? Because it's hard and confusing. And anyone who tells you otherwise, they're faking it. Either because they're self-righteous or insecure or both. I love you. Like, it's so hard that I'm gonna do something I've never done in 25 years of preaching. To try and make it clearer, I'm gonna do something I've never done in 25 years. I'm gonna preach with fill-in-the-blank notes. All of my type A people can say, hallelujah! Anyone? All you other folks are like, nah, like wandering stories, meh. Some of you are like, oh my gosh, Kyle's gonna actually try and stay on script. Hell is frozen over, oh. Some are like, I don't believe in hell, but ask any Niners fan. Oh, too soon? I joke to cover my pain, so that's where I'm at. So, whether the pain of the 49ers losing or trying to hear from God is more difficult, wherever you are, we're just glad you're here. And I just want to tell you 5 things you've got to know about hearing God's voice. Maybe 5 things never told you before. And I hope that one of them's like, boom, that's it. That's what God has for me today. And if you get 2, woohoo, double, you're awesome. You can tip in the back. That's a bad joke. I'm not doing that. Okay, I'm staying on track here. Week 2 of how to hear from God because it's so difficult. To understand how it's so difficult, let me share a story with you from about 3,000 years ago, 3,100 years ago, and there's this guy named Samuel. So if you have your Bibles, you can go to 1 Samuel chapter 3, and let me tell you Samuel's backstory. His mom, Hannah, was unable to conceive a child, her life dream, her identity as a woman in the ancient Near East. Imagine the pain of that. And then God miraculously gives her a baby. And instead of holding on to it, she gives her baby Samuel back to the Lord, dedicates, and says, my son is gonna live in the temple, live in the church, and be all about serving God and helping people worship and connect with God. So she gets this amazing miracle and gives it right back. Amazing story. But here's what we're gonna see. Spoiler alert. This guy who's literally lived his entire life in the church, he's a professional Jesus follower, he still struggles to hear the voice of God. So I can relate. It's 1 Samuel chapter 3. I'll read 1 through 10. Stick with me here. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. Eli is the head priest at this time. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. But one night, Eli, whose eyes were becoming weak, so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet burned out, and Samuel was lying in the house of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel answered, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me?" But Eli said, like every parent with young kids, "I did not call you, go back and go to sleep." It's the Kyle Stephen translation. So Samuel went back and lay down. Again, the Lord called, "Samuel." And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called." "My son," Eli said, "I did not call you. Go back and lie down." Now, Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. A third time, the Lord called, "Samuel." Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." And Eli gave him melatonin and said, "Go back to bed." No. Sorry, it's a little autobiographical. Then Eli realized. He couldn't see, his eyes were dim, but at this moment, his eyes were open, he realized something. He realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, "Go, lie down, and if he calls, speak. If he calls, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there, calling, just as the other times, "Samuel, Samuel." Then Samuel said, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." What can one person's struggles about hearing God's voice teach us? 5 things. Let's begin in verse 1. It says that the Lord ministered under Eli, and in those days, the word of the Lord was rare, and there were not many visions. Now, if you are here, you're thinking, wait. The word of the Lord, so does God speak to your ears? Or there were not many visions? Does he speak to the eyes? How does God speak? Now, some of you, if you're not reading it closely, it's actually a repetition of the same thing. The idea of a vision coming and God's word coming is really the same way of saying the same things. It's just that God is speaking. And so I'm like, well, that's confusing. I'm confused too, so much so that in my very first year of Bible college, I was sitting in my first Bible class. I had Dr. Beloy and Dr. B, and he was awesome. He was a pastor for a while. He was over 60 years old, had lots of life experience, which when you're like 18, 60 is like, whoa, don't touch them, they might fall over. And then, love you. Just write in the comment cards, I'll call and apologize. The third, he had a PhD in Bible. I didn't even know what a PhD in Bible was or looked like. So I said to him, I had this question. I was like, when it says that God speaks, what does that mean? Is it audible? Or is there an angel? Is it a vision like this? And he said, and I quote, I'll never forget, he says this, Dr. B, literally Dr. Bible, the Bible expert, what is it like when God speaks in the Bible? What is it like? And he says, and I quote, Thank you, very helpful. I'm paying $750 a unit at this private Christian school. I should be at a junior college where it's cheaper and they can actually answer my questions. Sorry, that didn't come off right, sorry. What's the point? The point is this. This is the first one here, and if we don't start this way, we're gonna kid ourselves, and it's this. God's voice is mysterious. And sometimes we don't like mystery because we're afraid of being wrong. Sometimes we don't like mystery because we like certainty. My engineers in the room are like, yeah, I don't like that. But let's be clear. So many of the best things in your life, there's mystery. Hey, tell me why that's your favorite song. You're like, I don't know. Hey, tell me what it was like when you knew for the first time you fell in love. No one's like, well, I took my pulse and my beat was, no. Hey, how'd you know that you wanted to ask that person out or marry them or make that big life change? Like, I don't know. Like, I knew as much as my brain could know, but there was a knowing beyond what my brain could know. There was something beyond what a spreadsheet could tell me. And if we're gonna be honest about that, that's part of life. Now, I know my engineers in the room like, my romantics in the room is like, yeah. But in the end, we've just got to begin with this premise that God's voice is mysterious. And you've got to realize that for two reasons. Number one, when you're struggling, it'll give you comfort. But also this, I hope it all starts with a sense of humility. There's no formula. It's not always the same way. And that humility starts us with a posture that says, okay, even if he's speaking, I've got to put myself in a posture. What's the difference? He misses it. And the third and fourth time he says it, what does he say? He says, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. You see, friends, that's what the posture is. It's this, God, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to say, I'm here and I'm listening. And it's a posture shift that happens because you know it's mysterious. You can't predict it. You can't count on it. But you know he's going to speak. So first one, God's voice is mysterious. Let's go back out. So how does he figure it out? He goes to Eli once. Hey, did you call me? Nope. Second time, did you call me? Nope. Third time, I think I know what's going on here. I think that might be God. Wait, Samuel, you work at a church. Like, you literally have lived your whole life there. How do you still struggle to hear God's voice? It's the second thing. It's the thing that many folks won't tell you. He needed Eli, who was so old, his eyes were going. If they had bifocals back in that day, Eli would have had him. And he could not see straight, but he still had something that Eli didn't. He had wisdom and experience. I've been there, I've done that. The same thing has happened to me. I think this is it. So if you're filling in the blanks, it looks like this. Number two, I can't even keep up with my own notes. Why don't do fill in the blanks? Here we go. Less experienced folks need more experienced folks to discern God's voice. In a Western culture that loves individualism, we're like, no, I can do it myself. But I learned this because we had Asian American foreign exchange students, not Asian Americans, Southeast Asian foreign exchange students who lived with us. And when I would compare the way that they looked at wisdom from folks who were older, and when I looked at the Americans, I'm like, oh, that's a little different. You see, I remember when I was in graduate school, I was trying to start a business. I always loved having a side hustle. And so I bought some iPods to try and resell them. Yes, iPods. For those who don't know what that is, that's the thing, like before you had an iPhone, you would have a phone, an iPod, and a computer, and then they put it all in your pocket. It's crazy, I know. But at this time, iPods were selling, so I bought them and I was flipping them. And then I went and I realized, oh my gosh, I lost a lot of money. And my uncle, who was a mentor to me at the time, he said, so Kyle, let me get this straight. You bought something that someone else didn't want, and it was a depreciating asset, and you thought you were gonna make money on that? I'm like, yeah, I did. He's like, dude, I love your heart. I love your go-gettedness. I love that. But next time you have a big idea, who are you gonna call for wisdom to see if it's a good idea or not? I said, can I call you? He's like, unfortunately, you have my cell phone number. But in that moment, I realized that even though I had great dreams, I didn't have great experience. And for me to figure those things out, I had to go with someone who's been there, done that. Single friends, I love you. But if you're looking for dating advice, don't talk to your single friends. Hey, you're struggling in your marriage. You got two options. You can go talk to your friend who always talks bad about their spouse, and that'll make you feel good because you can gossip about it. Or you go to someone like, hey, you're 20 years older than we are, and you still love each other, and your marriage has gotten better, and you've gotten through harder things. Can you teach me some stuff? You see that here, you're like, I don't know if God's speaking to me. I hope that there's a small group leader. I hope there's a mentor. I hope there's someone, you talk to me, a pastor on staff, say, hey, I need some wisdom here. Can you help me figure this thing out? Because here's what happens. When you realize you're less experienced, hopefully that creates humility. That humility creates an open posture, and that is where God speaks. even if you're a professional Christian like Samuel, you still need wisdom. Last bit on this, I'll tell you, I do a lot of things wrong, but one of the things I know I do right is I have more mentors on speed dial than anybody I know. I will not make a significant decision with calling people like, Kyle, can't you do it on your own? Nope. Why not? I'm not smart enough. I'm 40. Let me call someone who's 60 who's been there and done that. And then I'll figure out how I want to parent, how I want to lead a church, how I want to preach, how I want to do those things. You see, this is the thing you got to realize. Oftentimes, less experienced folks need more experienced folks to discern God's voice. But how do you get there? Okay, God's voice is mysterious, I get it. Okay, I need someone there, I need an Eli in my life, someone to help me decode it, but how do I build that relationship with that Eli? Or who do I know who my Eli is? The thing you gotta figure out before who your Eli is, you gotta figure out, do you have a heart that can listen to an Eli? What you're talking about. Look closely at this text. You're gonna see a phrase, a word in Hebrew that's repeated over and over. It's not repeated once, twice, thrice, 4, but 5 times. And when you're in the Bible, whenever there's repetition, that's God saying, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. What's repeated 5 times in this? There's just one phrase. It's one phrase in English. It's one word. It says, here I am. If you were with us on the first Sunday of the year, I preached a sermon about this Hebrew word hineni that talks about having a posture that's open to listening, open to receiving, open and fixated on it. The way I would describe a hineni posture, if you haven't seen it before, it's when you're training your dog and you got that dog treat and the dog's like, just totally fixated, and whatever you do, they're ready to jump and do whatever you want. It's that posture towards God. But it's interesting. Samuel says hineni multiple times, but only once to God. To whom does he say, here am I before that? He says it to Eli. Here's the thing no one's gonna tell you, but you can write it in your notes this way. Your attitude towards human authority reflects your attitude towards God's authority. I'm hearing the pain in the front row. I love it. I hope it hurts so good. Your attitude towards human authority reflects your attitude towards God's authority. Why? When you have a rebellious heart towards earthly authority, it shows arrogance and rebellion, and I can do it better. I'm smarter, I can do it. And can I be honest, that's like the funnest thing to do these days. I'm listening about politics. How many I got a great idea in politics? I don't got any great ideas, but I know that other guy is an idiot and we should not vote for him. How's that doing for you? Makes me feel good. Some of you, you're sitting there and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe my boss has this job. I could totally do it better. And you probably could. But until you learn to respect and honor them, you'll never sit in that seat. How do I know that? From personal experience, yes, but also from scripture. There's this story in the Bible where there's a young man named David. You know him as King David, but before he was king, he was just a little shepherd boy. And he got so popular, so beloved, that the king, Saul, was intimidated by it. And literally Saul wanted to go and kill David. And in this crazy story that things like this happen today, but it just feels like a Bible story because it seems so unlikely, is literally they are in a dark cave alone. Saul is going to relieve himself, and David is hiding there, hiding from Saul, and he has this opportunity to take Saul's life, the one who's trying to kill him. And here's what David, not King David yet, doesn't lay a hand on Saul. His friend's like, what are you doing? This was your opportunity. You could have taken him out. He was your number one enemy. And he said, no, when it's my time, it'll be my time. And I trust God's timing, and I'm not gonna take it into my own hands. And so I'm like, whoa, that's hard. That's really hard. But let me just tell you this. It is so much easier to complain from the cheap seats than learn and dive in and say, okay, you're my boss. I don't get it. Help me understand. It's really hard to say, I would not do it, I disagree, but I'm gonna submit to you in this way. And let me tell you, every time I've done it, I've never regretted it. Again, you're like, well, Kyle, you're the pastor, you don't have any authority. Yeah, right. I submit myself to a board, a leadership team. And there's been times where we're in those meetings and I'm like, I don't agree. I think you're wrong. But you all are all on the same page? Okay, then I submit to what you say. And here's what's happened every time. 80% of the time, I realized they were right and I didn't know it. The other 20% of the time, I'm like, we don't know what was right or wrong, but I know that God blessed and honored it, and I know my relationship with them was better. So next time I push back, they know if they push hard enough, I'll submit and I'll listen. And it's not a fight, it's a partnership. And I'll tell you, when I submit to it, I'm not only submitting to this human authority, I'm submitting to the spiritual authority. So I get this spiritual covering and protection. And so I'm like, that seems way too crazy. I get that. Last thing on this, I'm not gonna belabor it. So we say, well, Kyle, but what if the authority is wrong, or what if they're evil? Hey, as long as they're not asking you to do something evil, I think you should go with it. Not every time, I get that. Talk to an Eli, help discern it. But I want to tell you, friends, when you do this, you have no idea the bonds that it builds and the seeds that are planted. Because I know there are moments today where my staff want to do exactly what I wanted to do to my previous pastor. Like, you don't know, I'll go do it myself. And every time I can look at it and say, no, I'm reaping the blessing of doing it right before. For those of you who want to complain about your parents, know however much you complain about your parents, your kids will complain about you. So just ask the question. I'm gonna name them, do some stuff wrong, and I don't wanna do it that way. That's great. But I'm also gonna honor all the things they have done. Huh? Yeah, I'm gonna draw some boundaries and say, no, our family's not gonna do it that way, but I'm still gonna say thank you for all the blessing that I've been given. Because really it's a reflection of the heart, of humility, that says in the same way I don't rebel against human authority, I don't rebel against God. I'll just tell you, if you've got a rebellious heart towards authority, I wouldn't be surprised if when you go to scripture, you're like, I don't like that, I'm not gonna do it. Now you wouldn't say it that way, but that's the heart, friends. So your attitude towards human authority reflects your attitude towards God's authority. If you want more on this, just real quick little side, there's a great book on this by Watchman Nee called Authority and Submission, where he really talks about kind of the heart and spirit behind all of this. It's a short book. All of Watchman Nee's books are great. They're short and they're super transformative because they help you see spiritual insights the way you've never seen before. So you can read anything by Watchman Nee. It's gonna be gold. So here we go, we're moving on. So God's mysterious. God's voice is mysterious. I need other folks. The way my heart is towards human authority reflects my heart towards God's authority. What's next? Let me show you something. Let me take you all the way down to verse 19. If you're in verse 19, this is where everyone wants to get, but they forget what happened before it. Sorry, that's a spoiler. Verse 19, this is where folks want to get. The Lord was with Samuel as he grew up. He let none of Samuel's words fall to the ground. All of Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, recognized that Samuel was an attested prophet of the Lord. Now, for some of you who don't have your ancient Near Eastern Thomas guide with you to help you understand, let me give you a map of Dan to Beersheba. It's gonna come up here. What you see is Dan is as far north as you get, Beersheba is as far south as you can get. It's like saying, hey, his popularity went all the way through California, from Shasta to San Diego. Everyone's like, oh, it's everywhere. I think people are like, that'd be awesome. I want people to listen to me. I wanna have that. I wanna have that authority. I wanna have that respect. I wanna go viral and have millions of followers. I get that. But let me be clear about what is always gonna happen. Always, I'm gonna say again, always happens before verse 19. Before public popularity, go back and look what happens at verse 3. This, the lamp of God had not gone out yet, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord where the ark of God was. God, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? What I'm saying is this. You have no idea how many hours Samuel spent in God's presence before God even spoke the first time. You have no idea how many times he got it wrong before he got it right. You have no idea how many times he had to go to Eli and say, hey, am I figuring this out right? You had no idea how many times it happened in private before it happened in public. Actually, let me say it better. I got a better way to say it. I got TikTok to help me say it out. Hey, can we roll that TikTok video? This is gonna help illustrate this point even better. Go ahead and roll this.
Yeah, shoots 500 shots a day, 3,500 shots a week, 14,000 shots a month, 168,000 shots a year. These are practice shots. So he's been in the NBA 15 years. He's done 2.52 million shots in practice. In his entire career, he's only taken 15,000 shots. and he's made 3,000 three-pointers, and he's the greatest in history. Less than 0.1% of his shots have actually shown up in a game. So I always tell people, you're rewarded in public for what you practice in private.
Oh, he stole my line. There it is. What's rewarded in public, you are rewarded in public for what's practiced in private. You are rewarded in public for what's practiced in private. Let me give you another example of this. I told you about this guy, David, before, right? I told you I was starting to get popular, but before, David was a nobody. He was actually the smallest and least respected of all of his brothers. It was his job to sit there with the sheep and take care of the sheep while everyone else got to go do the fun thing and be in the battle and fight the Philistines. But he was the runt of the litter, so he'd just sit there and he'd have to watch the sheep. And 9 out of 10 times, there's nothing going on. There's no lions, tigers, bears. There's none of that going on. So what does he do? He just sits there by himself. What are you doing? He takes up his slingshot, hoping that there's gonna be a bear, and there's nothing. So he's just swinging, waiting, nothing. Practice shot, tree, oh, got that tree. All right, lion, tiger, bear, nothing, I'm bored. Got that. Lion, tiger, I actually got it. And then one day, after being the nobody, not even acknowledged by his dad in some ways, his dad says, hey, I got a job for you. He's like, me, I got awesome, I get to go to battle, He's like, no. You get to be DoorDash and take food to your older brothers who are in battle. You're like, but he submits to spiritual authority, his dad. He goes and takes food to him, and he gets there, and all of a sudden, the Israelites are fighting against the Philistines, and the Philistines have this big, tall, scary dude named Goliath, and Goliath's like, hey, one-on-one, any one of you can take me one-on-one, hey, winner take all. I'm like, what? And David hears this Philistine, this tall giant dude talking trash, and like, no one's gonna do anything about it? Like, what are you gonna do about it, pipsqueak? He's like, I'll show you. He takes it, whirls it. One shot. Pew. You can say, oh my gosh, it's a miracle shot. Maybe. But maybe, just maybe, he'd done it so many times in private that when it came time to do it in public, just like Steph Curry's jump shot. So friends, let me just tell you this. Before you tear down other folks who are doing things in public, just respect the work that they put in private. And for those of you who say, I'm not there yet, yeah, I know. I preached for over 15 years before I got paid for it. I'm sitting here, I'm 6 years in as a lead pastor. I will never preach without practicing in front of my team first. And you tell me what's good and what's bad. You want to prove of that? I had 7 points coming into today. And they're like, nope, cut that. I'm like, all right, you're right, it's better. See, the work I put in private gets me there. And in that, I don't know what it is that you want, but don't neglect the private. Some of you want the amazing marriage, but man, you have not put the time in private to pray for and love and submit your spouse and say, God, privately, for this marriage to work, my heart's got to be changed too. And so I'm coming to God in private saying, God, I need you to change me. So I'm like, I really, really want to be good at that thing, but man, my 5th grader loves playing basketball. He's like, hey, you think I'm gonna be in the NBA one day? I'm like, you're at Thomsen, probably not. It's like, how good can I be? I just said, I don't know. So I had him call one of the members of our church. One of the members of our church is a coach for the Sacramento Kings. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. This is gonna be a great motivating story. So I said, hey, Jimmy, can you tell my son about all the hours you put into the gym to get to where you are as a coach? Because my kid's like, okay, I can't play pro, but maybe I can coach pro. And Jimmy tells him all the things, all the hours, all the grind, all the things for all these years. And afterwards, my kid looks at me. I'm like, hey, what'd you think about that phone call? He's like, I don't want to be a pro basketball player. I get that. But what's rewarded in public was practiced in private. So I've taken all these ideas and I need an illustration to bring them together. So here we go. I had a friend who planted a church recently, and they have this diagram of a mountain that helped them explain how God speaks and how God works. And he said it's like a mountain journey. It's like it's climbing Everest. And you start at the beginning, And if you started this without humility, you're in trouble. He says the base of the mountain is about humility. You look at the mountain and say, wow, that's big and that's tall. And if you don't have the humility to go and train for it and to pack for it, you're gonna kill yourself. You're gonna die on the hike. So you start with humility. Same thing with God. God, I come to you humility. I don't know it all. I need help. God, can you be my Sherpa on this? But then there's that second part. There's that grind. There's that hard work. There's that discipline over and over. Going to church, going to small group, praying, saying no, all of it over and over. And there's that discipline. And that's where most of us quit, say, I don't want to do it. And because we don't have the humility or we don't have the discipline, we don't get to that third and final part, which is the best part. And that's the hearing and doing what God says. Friends, it is the most fun thing in the world when you hear God speak like, oh yeah, that's it. That's God's word for me. Or God's put someone on your life, you reach out to them and you see God do a miracle. That is the absolute best stuff. And that's what we want. But we have to have the honesty to say it begins with a humble heart, consistent disciplines that then lead to this. Some of you say, this is hard. Yep. I don't get it. I understand. So I'm like, I don't know. What if I do it wrong? You will. Samuel did it wrong 3 times, which is why you've got to get this fifth and final point. God speaks multiple times because we often miss him the first time. Some of you have a view of God that's like, oh, God never does it. He never shows up. No, he just shows up. You haven't seen it. Well, what if God speaks and I don't do anything? He'll do it again. Well, what if God brings the perfect job and then all of a sudden you're like, God's bigger than that. He can do whatever he wants, however he wants to do it. Listen, friends, if he gave his life on the cross to die for you, he's not going to say, oh, I told him once, now I'm done. Could you imagine any parent being like, I told you once, you should know how to do it? No. Any parent that loves their kids says, I'll tell you over and over and over. I have no idea how many times I've got to tell my kids they got to clear the dishes from the table. Oh, every day, 3 times a day. Okay, I get it. But I'm like, oh, these kids, blah, 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 blah. That's my heart that's a problem. The heart of God says, hey, bud, I love you. Remind you. Hey, how are we going to do this better? Hey, I love you. You can always sit at the table. No matter what you do, you'll always have a seat at this table. But for you to be part of this family, you got to learn how to carry your weight here. Carry my weight? Yeah, the paper plate. It's not that hard. That's the heart of God, friends. You see, God speaks through repetition. God will speak over and over and over. And because of that, we're going to do exactly what we did last week. We're going to trust that God speaks through Scripture. We're going to trust that through repetition, God's going to speak. And what we're going to do is we're going to give you a space to sit silently and hear from God. And I pray that as you walk out those doors, there's a word, there's a phrase, there's a picture, there's something in your heart from this passage that makes you say, God is speaking to me. You see, last week we ended with Psalm 23. Because the idea was this, sheep know the shepherd's voice because they've got great ears? No, because they spent so much time practicing hearing him. So we encourage you to take the time, take your heart, and stop and listen to what God may say. Maybe in this moment you want to close your eyes. Maybe you want to let go of whatever's in your hands and turn your palms face up. But in this moment, I pray that your heart does what Samuel's heart did and said this, speak, Lord, for your servants are listening. I'll read it twice. Just let God speak to you, however he may. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valleys, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. What word, phrase, picture is God speaking to you? The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.